So I've been interviewing a lot, and sometimes in my most recent interview, I got asked to do like an hour presentation. So that's what this is gonna be. This is gonna be, um, roughly an hour, unfortunately. So I'll do the main takeaways for the aim of this video, being that I'm trying to share my updates with interviewing, kind of give my insight and experience with this project that I will be demonstrating as part of my portfolio. Because I have noticed that a lot of the interviewers, some appreciate just talking, some actually want to see the project as a demo. They want to see the code, we talk about it, they want to go in depth. So that's kind of what this is. So for everyone watching so far, I currently just have this on OBS. Very basic setup of just recording my screen and the face. I was previously using Loom out of convenience from other take homes that I was using for just like a 5-minute quick demo. That was nice because it had agentic AI features that cleaned up audio and video. But not this. This is going to be a, unfortunately, raw, unedited rant for an hour, sharing what I've known, what I've learned, technologies used. Because the idea is to actually continue building on what this is, my portfolio, with zero cost architecture, design, and implementation. So at a glance, you can kind of already see for those who are experienced, and that will be the target demographic. I will be speaking as if the target audience is someone that I'm interviewing with and are for, and is a technical audience, while using what I've been calling chronological communication, which is the background, the scope, the problem, and so on and so forth, before we talk about the technical details. I will be talking for a few more minutes, give myself until 5 to 10, maybe 7. Then I will open up my own Excalibur and kind of give a higher level, we'll say, mapping of everything, because depending on the interviewer question, my most recent one that was asked was functional LLM and agentic systems. And using this portfolio as the high-end architecture, I did get asked the question of what was the business use case, so which maps perfectly with my communication framework that I've recently came up with that I vibe coded. I'll pull it up now, so I'm not just talking at people. So on my portfolio that's public, changelog is a little bit weird, but vibe coded this. I still have to clean it up. My weekly Claude limits are like 90%, so I'm saving that for like ad hoc resume tailoring, so that's why I'm making this video. Long story short, this is a mental model, one of the many that I've been studying and interviewing for the past year or so now that has been helping me navigate these interviewing concepts. Like designing things end to end usually means that horizontal track of designing your system, clarifying expectations, the business driven development, because that's really why we're being hired to do these things, unless you're just optimizing things for the sake of optimization. That's a little bit different. Then talking about your data sources, your data pipelines, so on and so forth. We'll just call that data engineering, because then it feeds into your model. That could be a machine learning model. We can get more technical in depth with that. But for me, I've always done more calculus-based modeling or modeling from scratch, depending on, again, the business need and the edge cases and the embedded business logic with that. And then that's on the technical side. And then sometimes, sure, you deploy things on the back end. That could be your code around the model and things before that, your server-side logic. If you are going to deploy things, like it's a little bit of a different frame of mind with what a backend server is and business logic and so on and so forth. What I'm hinting at is laying on top of your API, right? So if you're in Python, we start talking about like the abstraction vertical layer. You can have your backend logic, wrap that in like Fast API, for example, and then you start talking about Django and Flask, and you give real world examples of, it was interesting that Instagram was built on Django and how they scaled it. That was really cool. But, we'll talk about Fast API and the trade-offs. And these are the interviews. These are things you have to say, and it does demonstrate knowledge. So a little bit of homework on that does effectively communicate and signal We'll just say seniority. That's really what we're trying to do here. So then on the front end, usually it's just something like TypeScript, Django's full stack, Python. So you can do some Pythonic front end without getting into the higher level abstractions like, well, if the ecosystem and environment that you're working in is on Snowflake, for example, well, Snowflake has Streamlit on Snowflake, and that's a Pythonic front end integrated into your data warehouse. By the way, Snowflake is hybrid, so there's a little bit of data lake stuff. So for structured and unstructured. So, okay, right? So you can kind of see how even with that one short sentence example, kind of knowing end-to-end vertical integration helps signal these things naturally. And so I've been interviewing a lot. I've been practicing a lot. So that's why I'm making this video, because it's a practice for me so that I can focus on other things in this roadmap. Okay, going 1 more minute over time, right? So end-to-end, things could be local. The ops part comes when you're deploying something to the cloud. Like that's a whole different skill set. That's what it means to be end-to-end, to make things, let's say, production code. What production means could vary from team to team, but production we'll just agree is like users, real world data in the cloud. Okay, because some production for some teams could just mean like a Google Colab notebook, and then they never do backend API wrapping and then deployed on like some cloud service, etc. Right? Okay. Long rant, going too technical. Yeah. So hardware layer. You'd be surprised. I actually used it on my recent interview. We were talking about vertical integration, quality at scale debugging, and image analysis of reports of hardware. And so the question was like, if you have an OS, is it a glitch? There's nothing to work with. I was surprised there wasn't even assembly in this hypothetical example. It's never hypothetical. There's always some ground truth in that. And knowing about how Intel chips are manufactured was actually helpful, because the quality of the i5, i3, i7 chips are i9 now. Is dependent on, let's say, I believe it's like the wafers and like how it got burned. So if the circuitry and the cores fail, then it goes to a lower tier, but it's still like a product that people can sell, and so on and so forth. So hardware level all the way through to distributed systems. Okay, so having this in the back of my mind as I get asked questions helps me navigate how far back in time I need to go, where we are to the present, kind of the roadmap, and then of course the fourth dimension on this is scale and some other, let's say, system design considerations, the main four, not just CAP from software engineering, but from machine learning engineering. Let's say AI engineering now is reliability, what maintainability means, adaptability, and resilience. Those are the main four that I got from Chip Wen's machine learning systems book. So this has actually been nice, having a general understanding of software engineering, CAP theorem for data, and like your backend modeling as a starting point. Maybe you consider it for your overall system in some select areas, but you start thinking about trade-offs, and then you have you start asking other, let's say, characteristic questions, starting with these just to get things rolling. Because I have been asked about the performance, right, of a system. How would you measure the quantitative performance? Could be cost, finance, that's a good one. Business-driven development, time saved, possibly bottlenecks and streamlining things. But then also qualitative metrics, like how well something was. Like I got asked about the quality of a output from a language to another language. And so without getting too technical, I just like threw out like, to me, that's more of a qualitative performance metric. That's something that I think we would need like a human to help encode those, we'll say, soft skills and more qualitative characteristics. And realistically, it could just be like a survey, and then like we start building on top of that. But like some sort of numerical representation of these qualitative things, so that we can start programmatically quantifying these things, optimize it, and then start doing reverse, like, let's say, transcription of the embedded business logic and deriving insights to that. Okay, cool. So way over time, typical engineering PhD theory ranting. Let's start with this. So this portfolio and all the things that I'm trying to do is an attempt to do open source, zero cost. I guess I'll just jump to this. Architecture, learning about AI engineering across the SWE Compass that I've made myself. I don't know if that, anyway, it's a thing I just made up from my own notes. And so I think for the conversation of today, I usually introduce the mental models. That was the main one. I introduced the SWE Compass, end-to-end, the vertical abstraction, one of the interviews I've had, and I had good success with that. So that's why this is a longer 10-minute rant. So now I'll be segueing into like some demoable things, talking through and talking at you about what I've built. And maybe in the next video, I'll continue on this rant, maybe diving more into the code and the roadmap. But for this 1 hour conversation with myself, I will be sharing lessons learned and questions I've been asked during interviews, as a way for me to also share what I've learned, lessons, and kind of offload some of all these lessons as I work towards building out these mental models. Let's say some of the insights that I've had and interesting questions, that could be from communication. I'll have a built-out section on, it's not just what you say, it's how you say it, and some of the roles that I've been interviewing for, right? Because, we will be working with other people who are building these systems, and so you could optimize and prioritize a career in which you're not talking to people. That's fine. I used to be like that. That's great. But then, it kind of gets sad and lonely. So then kind of try to find a middle ground. Or, you can be a forward deploy engineer and do other non-technical things like DevOps. So those are other interesting career path that leans towards more or less communication and community building, like dev relations versus lower level systems and backend code where you're optimizing things, right? So there's like the spectrum. Okay, so the other thing too that I'm trying to offload some of all the things that I'm learning is like, it'd be nice to have a glossary of terms of all the things that I'm learning, and it is nice for me to also share like, part of my own homework and upskilling and maintaining what I've learned over the years now is my own notes. And so I'd always used to have like a bunch of these papers at school and in my own learning, and like it was always annoying to like have to review it and then lose the papers. But now that I'm a professional software engineer, I understand how cloud works, and so I am sourcing and consolidating my own glossary of notes here. In terms of references, thankfully, the local library that I am a part of has partnerships with O'Reilly, so I'm going through, I guess I'll show this, some books and learnings. Let's start with maybe design. I think design's okay. Do I have some? Well, not really. Let me do, I think data. I have a dedicated section on data. I could find the book curriculum. Or I might just do GPU for now, just to get the conversation going. Or it could be in general. I don't remember. I'm also doing this live, so it's a little annoying. Sorry. Okay, so let's do this. So somewhere in my notes, I had something similar with all these O'Reilly books that I have access to, thankfully. And consolidating lessons learned, main takeaways. This is on my portfolio. What I've taken here is Excalidraw, an open source resource, and integrate into my infrastructure. This is something that I've, through having conversations and exposure to, let's say, internal tooling at other big companies, like, let's say, big tech. This also demonstrates that I'm aware of this business problem, and I've done this, and some of the quirks that come with taking an open source, I don't know, library. Let's just say like taking something that's open source, like Excalidraw, and then integrating it with internal tooling and existing infrastructure or platforms. Okay, so that's what this is. And showing that for me, I'm trying to learn and upskill more about C, C++, and CUDA for engineering inference optimizations. That's just a personal interest of mine, having a background in a little bit of protein engineering. I wanted to learn more about protein modeling and optimizing inference there and how transferable that is is a computer scientist across GPU and CPU and distributed computing. That's a whole different rant. But yeah, so this is the data sources I'm going through these books. I have my notes here as I go through them. I'm showcasing this in case people are interested. Who knows? But the main takeaway for people is that I am going through these. I am sitting down and reading them. So I am also validating these glossary of terms, putting them in my own words. In some ways it helps me. So in other ways I'm hoping to be a, we'll say, credible source. I don't know. I'm a regular person too, trying to learn all this. So take that with a grain of salt for how credible I really am. But I'm trying. And sharing what I know and documenting it here for other people to know for free. So that's what this is all about. But yeah, so I'm doing quite a bit. I'm actively interviewing. This is 15 minutes. So now I'll move on to the actual demoable things. Now that I've communicated, the mission of this, which is the portfolio is to show, not tell, these things, because so many times in interviews I've been asked like some hypothetical situation. Let's just talk about these things, but I don't know. I'm an engineer, apparently. I have a formal education, and I don't like hypothetical and just talking about things. There's always some amount of ground truth and reality with these hypothetical situations. So I usually try to ground the interviewer in like, no, we're going to actually do this for real kind of thing. So that's what this is. This is to give the interviewer and myself credibility in what I've done, because I've recognized, even with my job history, I can't show the work that I've done, either because it's an NDA, it's the company's IP technically when you sign on to be an employee. So you might get sued. So you need some way to show you are credible, you know how to do this work, you've done it. And so I've had much better success and better in more recent interviews with this framework, which is why I'm making this video, of starting with showing them what I've actually done, reassuring them that this is open source. It's supposed to be public so that we can talk about these things. And then it builds credibility and a little bit of trust, in which I will then discuss the enterprise level work that I've done. Okay, so that's really what all this is about. More about, we're just two strangers interviewing with another. Like, they have a job, there's a business need, and like you're an employee trying to fulfill that problem, right? So you have to build your credibility in a way in which you are the solution to that problem, and be cool to work with, be a good culture fit, so that they want to work with you, and then they choose you. Hopefully. I will hopefully hear back next week and I have a new job. But I've also been in this for about a year now, so struggling like everyone else. Okay, so zero cost, not low cost. If I have to pay, this project has failed. Okay, so all right, so that's the high level. We're making this portfolio because the business problem is trying to get a job, which means we have to think about what is our inbound. I should start with outbound. Like, our baseline is, as employees, we look for jobs. We go on LinkedIn, we go on Indeed, like all these other job portals, and we start applying. Because not everybody has connections and networks, so that was me. I did this, and I'm doing this because I don't have a network. I don't have people that I'm connected with that could help me find a new role, that could refer me, unfortunately. So I also have the cold start problem. And so this is something I will be doing moving forward to help accumulate this over time. Unfortunately, I am just starting out my career, so sucks for me being young, unfortunately. So this is the funnel. We have outbound. We have resumes that we are applying to companies. But also, if you recall, recruiters could also find us on LinkedIn, right? So the idea is because we're now in the era of AI, and I know a little bit of machine learning and AI, and we now understand with agents, like that's built on the language models. Let's not talk about vision language models yet. And the multimodal stuff, we've kind of moved past that. Like, we've also moved past text to text, and we're kind of already doing voice things, and now people are doing like video. Okay, so like, you share all these knowledge and tidbits to the interviewer to disclaim, like you're also keeping up and you're aware of where we currently are, but let's just set easy expectations and start with text to text. So that's what this entire portfolio is. And I would highly recommend you go through that exercise and you verbally state to them, like, let's set expectations, start with text to text for this exact reason. Okay. So, in the most recent interview that I've had, I actually started first with the LinkedIn agent, because, we start talking about, well, what is an agent? You can have the conversation with the interviewer first. Depending on how technical they are, I do it reverse chronological. So I got corrected with someone that's been doing this for 16 years. And they corrected me where I said an agent is a large language model that's able to reason and action on its own output, and perhaps has tools that could be a function call that could action on its output beyond its training data. They gave me a different explanation. Their definition was, no, an agent is an autonomous decision making on its own, right? So I kind of picked up on that, having interviewed with other more experienced machine learning engineers, where they've asked me, did you come up with this? And that was the question. And so I know now it's not like a trick question, but there's some hand wavy, like you gotta understand the subtle text and like where they're trying to guide you, or if you know kind of questions. And I think that's what they were hinting at, because they are in the business of building agents. They are not in the business of building workflows. Okay, so that was the key word that I got corrected on, was I was building workflows, not agents. To which I rebutted, because the original question that this person had asked me was building LLM and agent systems, right? So let me go back to the SWE Compass. This is not perfect. This is just like a navigation communication tool that I still have to figure out. They said systems. That's a higher level abstraction than a workflow. Like, my agent is a part of my workflow. Like, it's code around, like, for example, we're talking about my job board. And in that conversation, specifically about, hey, this is a system, this is my job board, there's an ETL pipeline, extraction, transform, load. There is a bit of data preprocessing and data sourcing that I've done through scraping publicly sourced APIs, which is, the direct company job board. And then I have a cron job and all this other deterministic traditional software engineering. Once I get to the point where I have high quality data inputs that I've preprocessed, then I gave it to my agent, and then it's currently broken. Then it will tailor resumes to the roles. At this time, I did not have a resume job description ranker. I do now. I've been busy. I have that now. That was feedback that I got from interviewing. At the time I admitted I didn't have it yet. I've been working on it. And so now I now have I think it's a small language model. I'm using OpenRouter, and they have some ranking models. I'm still debating. I also have to discuss like the Hugging Face CPU inference on 0 GPU, and then trying to fit a model on there, and then maybe I use that as like my ranker. But the whole point is pre-processing steps, traditionally deterministic as code. Now we're layering in some machine learning, data science, semantic things. It could be like another ranking model, more lightweight than a small language model, depending on compute. Or maybe I do want a larger language model, but I have limited tokens because I have to keep this entire thing 0 cost. So that's why I'm proposing for myself to look into a smaller language model deployed on Hugging Face, because that's a marketable skill as a platform to know about. And they have some CPU compute that you can use, and so leveraging 0 GPU and Gradio, which I will not pull up here, you can get a cloud-based API endpoint that can serve these predictions without having to worry about token costs, and so on and so forth. Okay, so like, yeah, so these are all conversations that I've had, insights into LLM systems, workflow, and like the agent part, right? So I ran out of time in that interview. We got to the point where I got to mention the resume tailoring part and the agent, and we getting to this point. And yeah, it's pretty challenging in the time that I have in this, we'll say part 1 of this, without getting into the code and like diving deeper. But yeah, so at a high level, like, yes, I have agents. These are like complete end-to-end production-like code that is in the cloud. None of this is local. So it was maybe a little bit hand-wavy to communicate that to the interviewer at the time. But again, fortunately, I built up credibility and trust in the beginning of it, because I got to show, go back to my portfolio, some of the lighter weight agents that I have, because the job board was a pretty heavy project, and it's still not quite done, right? It's always going to be a little bit ongoing. But it was good enough where, putting this disclaimer with them, like, hey, let me move my face if I can live. I understand LLM systems, agent building, software engineering, and machine learning. Okay, like I get that, right? So, but they don't. And we're interviewing for a job. They don't know you. They just have this resume. Who knows, like, this guy credible or not? So, okay. So you have to say, we talk about these agents. I have a lighter weight resume, retrieval augmented generation agent, but I think, you lead the conversation. We'll introduce it with this. We'll talk about the LinkedIn, how that's all combined together with like my agentic writer, how that feeds. It generates data sources that I'm using for, let's say, in this case, it's an online agent that's live, deployed on Vercel that we can actually talk to. Then here we go. So, it's probably at capacity because I'm using Gemini 3.6, which came out a few weeks ago, let's say August, at the time of recording. So there's some reliability issues because, new model came out. And so now everybody switched to the new model. So now we start thinking about maybe I use the model before that, something that's more reliable. Okay, so we start thinking about that. I have some fallbacks. Hopefully it retries. And if it doesn't, then, that's part of the demonstration. You talk about this and you just own it. Okay, so hopefully it works. But if not, then that's fine. And that's okay. Okay, so unfortunately, I will be talking more about this because I did get corrected. The way that this is working, honestly, I just called it a RAG agent because it was the marketable term at the time. I got corrected and was told that I'm actually doing something called cache augmented generation. I don't know. To me, my rationale was my resume is like, I'm not going to open it. I might dox myself if I do it on YouTube. I know people will find this and like, okay, but you go out of your way to dox me. But my resume is like 2 pages. And I don't know, that's like what, 2,000 words or something. Token wise, I don't know, like 50% of that. It's like 3,000 tokens. Gemini models are like 1 million tokens, right? So you do the math. It's like, what's that, 183 to the order of like 186, so 3 orders of magnitude. Like, no, it's fine. I could just like pass in my resume as a markdown file to the language model in which like you wrap around the user query that comes in, and then so I just thought it was like a vectorless RAG approach. And then I got corrected and said, then they told me their definition of this was a cache augmented generation. The person has 16 years of experience on me. Like, I'm not going to like fight that battle. So, you like thank them and then you appreciate like the correction and the insight and knowledge, right? Okay. So there's your effective communication. yeah, so we talked about this, and then it was a lighter weight agent, just like, like an icebreaker, like a conversation started. Okay, cool. So that was like a bit of an intro for like my, well, icebreaker agent thing. So, but the person that asked, we're talking about functional LLM systems and the business problem of getting a job. So, it's been my experience speaking with very technical senior people that they usually tend to like to see reverse chronological. Show me the demo. I don't want to talk about things like show me. Okay. So the first thing I did actually was, okay, well, that means they want to see the data. Okay. So this is what I did. I went into my LinkedIn impressions data. This is all free. I don't have premium, by the way. And I was trying to figure out from a data analytics, a little bit of data science, front end here, monitoring observability. That's what this is. Trying to figure out like, should I talk about, my time frame, 90 days. And then I remembered like, oh yeah, I started this job search in January, right? So I walked them through them like I'm doing this now and said, I went on the job market in January, so it makes sense that I don't have anything, here. And, the person's been in AI for like 16 years, and so they know more than me. So it was a nice chat to say like, yeah, so the data looks like this for a reason, right? Like I had nothing. If I start posting like every day, for, so on and so forth, or maybe I go viral, right? If I go viral, then it looks more like a exponential curve, right? Then, or maybe I fall off and it turns into a V curve, right? So the reason why it looks like this is because I was trying to bypass the anomaly detection, right? So you slowly ramp up. I don't know if you want to call it canary deployment. I actually threw in that term in like throughout my interviews. You start posting, right? So 0, I went on the job market in January. You start posting like once a week. Oh, here we go. So here we go. January is where it starts, and slowly ramp up, and then as I've been working on this and sharing more of my thoughts and learning more about AI and setting up my CI/CD for this pipeline, because the LinkedIn API can allow you to post text, this is when I actually started posting maybe like twice a week, maybe every other day. And it's like, okay, I have a little bit of content. Let me start ramping up. Maybe let's do every other day. I started doing like 3 times a week, okay? And then I was pretty happy in this point in time when things were kind of exponential. And then things started to slowly go down, and this is when I started to reflect on the initial data capture. Things started to plateau here, okay? And then the question of like, okay, well, what did I do between here, where things growth started to slow down, to here when I broke through and growth started to engage again? And the person had asked me a really good question about how I did that. So as you can see on my screen, there's this export button. And so I walked them through, like at that time when I was in this phase where I was plateauing, I downloaded my performance metrics. And then, the person is a technical person. I got to say feature engineering. So I got to say, from looking at the performance of posts that I've featured, that I've hand selected for high performing posts, I walked them through posts that have high engagements. Like this one has 16, this one has 6. I have more that I've added. This is one thing I actually started doing was I put my resume link directly on top so recruiters and anyone else can easily access. I have a cool thing that's after as a segue. And then, I have posts that have, over 10, almost 10 engagements. And walk them through this post that during that interview was posted live that same morning. I had the interview in the afternoon. And they got the live reaction of this next generation of posts, which I am now. Oh, let me go back. Okay, so yeah, so things plateaued. I started the next batch of posts where I'm engaged, and so I started plateauing again. And so let me zoom in a little bit more. Maybe to 30 days. Right, and so what I'm sharing now is the start of this next growth curve. Okay. So why I'm showing you this is because that breakthrough of posts, I explicitly got to walk them through and said, downloaded these metrics, reviewed these featured posts that have been performing well, and told them. I used to only have this as my call to action. Pretty blunt, pretty cold. So I actually improved the post by adding another call to action, a little bit more of a warmer follow-up. Walked them through improving the hook of my post. And then the body of the post, like I'm doing this with this video live, sharing your experiences, lessons learned. There needs to be value for the reader if people are going to read this. And it needs to sound human. Because it's me. Like this, like I'm posting this through the LinkedIn API. This is me. These are posts that I validated as part of this offline model. And showed them. I have banned words, character limits, no dashes, and even Wikipedia has like a page for AI generating sounding prompts, right? So you can use that to make things sound human and then make it sound like you, and then layer in what makes constraints like the design of your output for your text generation. So that's what this is. And, I had 2 impressions, right? Or two engagements. And that met the success criteria for answering the question. The interviewer asked me a really good follow-up afterwards. I forget what it was exactly, but unfortunately, the response I had to say was, I cannot answer that because I'm currently collecting data. That's a valid response. Like I'm at my second plateau. At the time of recording, we can already see a little bit of growth curve breaking through for additional impressions and growth there. And remember, I'm speaking to a technical person. We're doing reverse chronological communication. And the original question on optimization was going from impressions to engagements, right? The reason why I forgot that question was because I kind of wrote it off because they were asking me how to further optimize for engagements, and I had to correct them and say, actually, that's not the intention of this project. Like the design of what we're doing here is to engage with the LinkedIn platform in order for recruiters to find us higher in their back-end search algorithm, like SEO optimization. And actually, before I move on to that, let me go back to this for a moment. One of the follow-up questions I got before I pivoted to the homepage of this was they had asked about churn. I said churn. They were asking about users, recurring users versus inbound new users coming through and seeing these posts. And I got to explain to them, well, actually, like this LinkedIn CI/CD thing that I put together is actually posting things in an offline manner in a recursive way. Because even in social media, you can see it. Like people are just reposting things over and over again. And that's how I'm also addressing this churn problem of getting consistent engagement on the platform with an inbound of new users, while supporting value add with we'll say existing followers or connections. Because not all existing connections or followers will even read or engage your post, let alone have more inbound leads. Okay, so I made that disclaimer before I moved on to the homepage, because for recruiters, the heuristic of put the role that you're looking for, not the role that you're aspiring to be, roles that you are going to try to be employed to or for. A little bit of your tech stack, what they're looking for. Try to have keywords that they're searching for, and it's easily accessible on the headliner. But also try to, optimize your about page. Excuse me. And this is the hook. I've optimized that, and maybe they're interested in learning more. And then the design of your LinkedIn page also needs to be, let's say, accessible and easier to use. And that's why I've intentionally linked my public portfolio resume link as my featured. So again, I will not open it. You can probably find it. But yeah, recruiters can just come and look at it. I'll probably have to remove some sensitive information after this video. But no, like I think it's fine. And then yeah, so talk to them about all this hook, call to action, and then consistent experience throughout your professional experiences. Because there are recruiters that have showed me and they've told me that they are using AI, LinkedIn profile reviewers to make sure like the experience that you say you are, it's consistent throughout your professional experience as well. Not all recruiters are as technical, so they might rely on that more than understanding the nuances with, we'll say, our technical background that we're interviewing for. So that is why the LinkedIn page is tailored towards recruiters so that they message and we have consistent inbound leads. Okay, so the fun factoid I got from this interview and this project was some of the other recreational things that's come up with not just optimizing for engagements, but then, so as a side effect, like, a PR agency found me and they thought my profile and portfolio was interesting. They wanted to learn more about my experience and insight to AI-enabled biology, not just more agents and chatbots and workplace automation, which unironically I'm interviewing for. And so I got to show like, oh yeah, I'm now featured in International Business Times, and so like it costs money to do this kind of stuff. So I'm waiting for the next job change to come back and start, building more of a robust portfolio. And so this is all just to build credibility. And I don't know, I'm a normal guy, so like people think I'm professional and I know all this stuff, but just learning like everybody else. So yeah, walked them through this. Then we went back to the job board, talked about some data pipelines, how this is all set up, Postgres, Neons, lighter weights, serverless Postgres. Let me pull up some resumes. Okay, and then, blob storage for your resume upload. The code itself is open source, but for time, I'll keep it higher level. Probably sketch it out on my own Scala draw. But otherwise, like I try to keep things already part of this. Putting things if people are interested to learn more about the pipeline and that the end-to-end model of like design, data, backend, or design, data, model, backend, front-end, ops. Before we start talking about the machine learning side of evaluation, monitoring observability, which the monitoring observability part I just put together as ops. And then like, most of the times you're not training models yourself, which by the way, I'm grouping together as the model section, and then deploying that to serve and inference. That's part 2. That's, again, I'm putting that as ops. So in my mind, this all makes sense. Effectively communicating this stuff is a little bit difficult if you are also not, let's say, familiar with everything going on. But in terms of the interviewer's question about, a project that we can talk about that demonstrates end-to-end, systems and functionality, and, addressing the original business problem of trying to get a job and, the employee looking for an employer, to convey these things. I just felt that the job board was a good example of that, because the job board answers the outbound, the employee applying to roles. Because what we just finished discussing was more of a medium project for inbound leads from recruiters, optimizing for recruiters to give you inbound leads to then talk to. Let me go back to the change log for the stakeholders. Here we go. Okay. So we just went through the inbound. Recruiters come and find you on LinkedIn. They message you. You schedule some time. I just had 3 back-to-backs before recording this. Then, the process goes like, well, you get past them, and then they go back to the hiring manager. Maybe the hiring manager doesn't like you. Maybe they don't think you're a good fit. Fine, you move on. You find the next lead, whether it's inbound from recruiters or you're applying to jobs. Okay, and some after you meet with the recruiters, maybe you meet with the hiring manager. It might take a week. Might take 2 weeks. Maybe they like you. Maybe they think you're a good fit. Like in one interview that I had, and then they scheduled like an on-site, all technical rounds, 4 rounds, all on the same day. And that's usually how this goes. Honestly, I've had the other experience where you get a recruiter, you chat with them, they give you a take-home. Pass the take home, hopefully. Then you meet with the hiring manager. Maybe they pass you along to a final round, so on and so forth. But this has generally been my experience. It's usually been like if you're a high like compatibility, good fit, they usually move pretty fast. Recruiter, hiring manager likes you, and they move to hiring manager, and then they just schedule everything all at once, and then they kind of pick and choose how well you perform compared to the other candidates they have in their pool. Okay, right. So this is all just to show like a combination of LinkedIn's the inbound lead for recruiters where you're not applying. The outbound is where you are applying. Ideally, you find companies and roles that you would actually be qualified for, that you would actually work at. And then, you just do your best to prepare, practice effective communication. Try to tailor your responses to not just your audience, but the fit. And, I should probably write some of the FAQs that I've been getting with recruiters. Most of the logistic ones are like, are you a citizen? Do you need sponsorship or now? Where are you located? When do you start? Those are the like very baseline common ones, right? So why I'm showing all this is because maybe I'll pull up my agentic router now. I have. Let me introduce this for a moment and go back. Part of the portfolio itself on Vercel, like, I walked the interviewer through this as well, is if they want to know more about the code and the actual system design and how things are like linked together and mapped, well, like this is what this is for. Like I have Mermaid.js rendered that's agentically written. They can dig around this if they really want. I introduced the agentic writer because it fuels and powers my LinkedIn post, my Medium post that I'm working on, and I have it inspired my dedicated resume writer, for example. Because the thing with the resume thing is sometimes it is nice to have a cover letter, but let me go to this one for a moment. In the interview, I walked them through the agentic writer because we were talking about the LinkedIn stuff. But for this conversation, I'm now pivoted to the job board. In my experience with recruiters, it's not just the resume. Very rarely have I had to do the cover letter, but let's see if I have it. Maybe I don't. I don't think I do. I have a skill that should respond. Resume response. Yeah. Okay. So this is something that I had to make because the reality is, even if you don't get a take home, they're going to ask you additional pre-screening questions. Whether that's when you're applying or when the recruiter comes to you, they send your profile to the hiring manager, but then they can't do that until you answer these questions. That's why I made this. So either way, I always try to tailor my resume to the role. I'm trying to keep this to an hour. This is already a long rant. Maybe part 2, I'll go into more detail. Even more detail than this stuff. Talking about like the design, making like the engineering that went into like, no, there's a reason why it's structured this way. It's okay. So for this This is a skill that I put together. It's a workflow where after I've tailored a resume, I have my experiences now optimized for the role, in which the resume response skill will now take that resume optimized for the company, which also has the original job description of that company, and will respond to the questions asked by that company based on my experiences. Literally. It's been great. 300 words is quite a bit. But it gives me something to work with to kind of like prune it, summarize it, kind of like massage it a little bit. 150 is okay if I want to like be a little bit lazy. Spoiler, I did change it to 150 in like reality. Mainly because like we go back to the interviewing process for a moment. I think it was here. You know, things happen. Maybe I don't like them. Let's be real about this. Like, this is supposed to be a two-way thing. I think I have a dedicated section on this actually. Maybe it's this one. Yeah, here. Okay, cool. So let me. Okay, cool. Yeah. So the thing is like the recruiter's just doing their job. They're just trying to work with the hiring manager to get the position filled, right? Because even if you get the job description, I have so many experiences where like, based on the job description, I'm a good fit. You speak with the hiring manager, the job description has nothing to do with what they're actually looking for. So it's like, great. So you optimize for the wrong thing. That's a very common issue. Oh, and by the way, like, consider unintentional biases with what you're optimizing and like what you're doing. Like, if I get this job, would recommend that. That's something that I had to like think on the spot. And through reading Chip Wynn's book, really helped me understand like, you know, the consequences of our actions with data, the quality, the impact of our decision making just based on the data source itself. Okay, so that's pretty cool. And applying that live during an interview is also very cool. Okay, so anyway, sorry. So yeah, as you go through the process of, you know, recruiter, they're just doing their job, you know, they're just trying to fill the role. You actually want to talk to the hiring manager, right? Because that's going to be your direct hire. Like, that's the person you're going to be reporting to. So you really assess like communication style, fit, the team and culture, that not just at the company, leadership there above your hiring manager, if you're not speaking with like a, you know, CEO, or so on and so forth, your CTO and your vertical chain, but also your horizontal, like your peer-to-peer connections. And like who you'll be working with, like whether you're speaking with like technical people or speaking with other non-technical people, like you are also evaluating them. There have been roles and positions I've just completely written off because I didn't like their interviewing process. Like the most recent one that I had, speaking directly from experience, was a recruiter reached out to me, was interested, and then they gave me like 12 questions I need to answer. And I was like, no, that's why you interview me. Like, I don't want to work here. Like, what is that? And then there's been other times where, you know, the interviewer, the hiring manager, we just weren't a good fit. Mainly because I didn't want to work for them. Like, that's really the evaluation criteria, is like, would I work for this person? Because it's not just about the money. Like, I understand, like, we get a job for money, but like, it'd be nice to like enjoy what you're doing. So that's the rationale here. Let's see. 7 or so minutes left. Okay, cool. Yeah, so like this is literally what I went through. I'll like keep it to like a 5-minute wrap up and takeaways and closures, because I literally had to go through this with an interview that I had where it was more 45 minutes. They allotted an hour, and I've had to do this a few times now, actually, like an hour, some were 30 minutes. The most recent one was 30 minutes. We just walked through basically today's conversation more condensedly, but I prioritized the LinkedIn. The LinkedIn one actually had a better offline model, real world functional pipeline end to end. And then at a higher level, a little bit of digging into the code, because I honestly, like, the job board is cool, but it still doesn't have the metrics that that person I know was like looking for, that we can talk to and have an engaging conversation about. So that's why I started with the LinkedIn thing and spent more time there. And then through that, I got to build enough trust where, even though I was getting roasted and criticized for showing them the code for the data pipeline that I have, where I have the resume agent that I mentioned that I have a local version of that's tailoring my resumes, I refactored it and migrated to TypeScript for all these reasons, better DOM integrations with JavaScript, a lot of things are JS rendered. Yeah, and then migrating the validation scripts into the prompt itself and seeing the performance there, and having that discussion on the trade-offs for the quality of the output. I tend to do both. In the local version, I had both in the prompt as well as like validation scripts. The agent is supposed to run afterwards, so like before and after, and then iterating on that. So we had like conversations about, like, I don't know if it's evals, but like having design and control over your output of your agent. But got to discuss with them. This is like version 2. I had a local version of version 1 in the interview that I'm discussing for this rant that I'm currently on. They had only seen the code at the higher abstraction level, at the workflow level, like the code that we were running out of time, similar to this, and I couldn't get to that specific agent part. So next time I get that question, what I'm going to be doing moving forward is actually going into the code layer for the CI/CD part and showing them the logs, I believe would be better, because what I did live, as I am now in the interview, I pulled this up. I showed them, like, yeah, the GitHub Actions running the CI/CD kicks off the agent layer that's a part of that. At that time, I didn't have like run failures. Let's see. This is not a good example, but fortunately, this is my video and I can go as long as I want. I'm going to keep it to an hour, but for the LinkedIn one, it is a workflow. This is more of an offline model. I did describe to them, like, I agentically wrote these things, and passing the LinkedIn text payload and headers and so on and so forth, like this. Okay, so I'm showing this because next time I get this question, this is what I will be doing. Rather than going into the source code itself and navigating this, I'll be going into the logs. Right, so I remember I had used LinkedIn's own platform for monitoring and observability of the performance of my profile in this project. However, on the data side, let's see. In this example that I'm ranting on right now, for my job board, what I'm currently debugging is, we could do it today, I guess, actually. Well, let me do one that I know will work for time. Is token outage. So, yeah, so the model that it's using, the role that it's identified, and then debugging the error. Right, so we're doing this live together as I speak. And I can talk to them about the design of my code, how I have LLM fallbacks. If they want, I can show them the code. Conceptually, I have retry considerations. In the beginning of this, I talked about, improving the token efficiency by passing things through another pre-processing ranker, or maybe a small language model that I have local inference, because keeping things zero cost, I really should be, like we do normally, highly tailored not manual, but like highly fit, highly tailored quality resume two roles that you would actually apply for. Ah, it makes sense. I have 0 tier. It's not like I'm paying money for this anyway. So like, yeah, I really should be doing that for the Gemini large language model anyway. All right. Anyway, so the other thing too is like I have like an expiry, some other limits because there's also cloud ML op or like just ops in general considerations of like persistent servers, how long you can run things. Like, realistically, when I was running this locally through testing, like the process took like 2 hours. So like I just doubled it, give it some buffer room. 50% is pretty fine. So if something goes wrong, it has a hard cutoff and some various other checks in between that at this time I was debugging and capturing things. I tried to implement some solutions. As you can see, it failed. But, we think about this for a moment. Let's do it live. Yeah, so I have some debugging that I need to do after this video. I tried to implement the re-ranking things. Sure, so I'll figure that out. But one of the key changes that I did, I now have, I should change this. I now have two jobs going on. One is the ingestion pipeline of new roles, and this actually runs 4 times a day. This is the deterministic part of looking at the data source for the roles and the companies that I'm interested in, checking my database to see if it's a new role or an existing role. Obviously, if it's a role that I've already have captured that I'm keeping for 3 to 6 months, I'm still debating about that. Then I remove it, and then then I add it if it's new. And this runs every at the start and end of business hours in Pacific time, and then the same times at night. So 9 a.m., 5 p.m., 9 p.m., 5 a.m. And that should capture like new roles as they come in, and it gets logged for long-term storage. Then the resume tailoring thing, because the Gemini token limits reset on like the last call that you've done on a rolling window in a rolling 24-hour window, means I really should be running like batch jobs like once a day, right? So you can kind of see like I now have 2 different workflows working to the greater system that has like asynchronous scheduling needs and requirements, and that's really important because now we're putting these things from theory, from what I was reading in Chipwin's book, to practical, like real world, to conversations that we can actually talk about because we do this in our day jobs anyway. So yeah, so these are the frequencies, these are the bottlenecks, these are the design and the original problem we're trying to solve. Yeah, so I have some debugging to do. This is going over an hour now, but I just wanted to show and share my experiences and what's worked for me for these interviews, walking people through like what I have done and have good success with doing longer form interviews discussing functional LLM systems and agent building, walking them through the design, the business problem, the implementation, the bottlenecks, you can always do workarounds, but I try not to do workarounds. But like proposed solutions that you would try to iterate on previous versions, problems that came up, like how NVIDIA, has, let me pull it up. NVIDIA has accepting applications at least until a date, whereas Apple has what you would normally expect, posted dates, right? So there's little quirks there that affect the design of your pipeline and how you pre-process data, right? So all these little nuances, and throwing in specific jargon and terminology. Here's the glossary. I think the one that I'm thinking about is like feature engineering. Hopefully it's in here. Okay, right. So like talking about feature engineering and like the life cycle, and then discussing trade-offs. These are all feedback and questions that I had through failed interviews that I've had, fortunately the privilege of going through, because not everybody gets interviews. And so I wanted to share my hard lessons learned, again, because unfortunately I don't have mentorship in that regard or connections to talk this through me. So talk through this with me. So unfortunately I'm learning all this the hard way, and so I wanted to document what I'm learning. It helps me. Then I'll like revise and learn as my note taking here. Work on continuing to iterate on this. I'm getting closer to final state for the job board because of the vertical scaling limits. And yeah, I don't know. Maybe part 2, I'll go in more detail and sketch things out visually, because I think part 1, I just wanted to talk for an hour, replicate what it would be like and what it has been like interviewing and demonstrating what I've discussed today. Let's say in a more relaxed, like casual, delivery, roughly an hour. And yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'll think about what else I wanted to share after summarizing notes from this video.